So I'm going to get us started and introduce this session because this content is really important and something that we haven't necessarily covered yet in this webinar series. So I'm really excited, Bianca, to pass the mic over to you and to just hear what you have to say. So I'll get started with my introduction. So there's no further delay. I'm Sam. If you are new to this webinar series, I've had the pleasure of hosting basically this webinar series we've done every week for the last 4 months. So we've brought in experts from our community, from our ambassador community, who have come on and delivered these free webinars about something that they're an expert in. And often it has been about affiliate marketing, content creation, topics related to travel blogging. But today we're switching things up a little bit, relevant to all of us, but more thinking deeply, okay, what is the impact of this lifestyle? Being nomadic, being a digital nomad, traveling, creating content as we go. And so Bianca's our expert today. And if you don't know Bianca Caruana, she is a Australian Maltese blogger, podcast host, first-time author who specializes in stories surrounding compassion, sustainability, and spirituality. She is a first-time author, as I mentioned. Her book, Soul Truth, comes off the back of 9 years of blogging experience and storytelling from her blog that she is most known for, The Altruistic Traveler, which I've been on your site, Bianca, and I'm really excited to dive into a lot of that content further. She's passionate about sharing voices and stories that shape the future for the better. So welcome, Bianca. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and hello to everybody that's joining in from around the world.
Yes, hello. Who else do we have? Okay, we have South Africa. Welcome. Hi, John. Amazing. So global audience for you as always. And so after Bianca's presentation, she is going to stick around a little bit for a Q&A. So as you're going through the content and you're listening to all this goodness that she's prepared for you, if a question comes up, definitely use that Q&A box. At the end, I'll come back and we'll do a little bit of a fireside chat there. So if you are new to this series and new to me and new to SafetyWing, I'll tell you a little bit about the company who's really helping empowering this movement. So SafetyWing is building a global social safety net for remote workers and nomads. So as this increase in living nomadically, traveling the world, working from anywhere has increased, SafetyWing has come in and has wanted to create a suite of products with all of us in mind to ensure that there's equitable and fairness in this movement and that everyone is able to access this at the same level. And so one of the ways that SafetyWing is doing this is they are removing geographical barriers as one of the ways that people access opportunity. And as we do this, a number of products have come into the market. One is Nomad Insurance, which is our fastest growing product, over 100,000 customers worldwide. And that product protects you with affordable health and medical coverage as you're traveling and crossing these borders. So it works like all of your favorite subscriptions, one monthly fee, no matter where you are in the world, as long as you stay up to date with your subscription and you are working outside of your home country. So Bianca's going to tell us a little bit more about Nomad Insurance and her role with us at the very end. But at this point, I'm ready to pass things over to you. How are you feeling, Bianca?
Feeling good. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it.
Of course. As you're getting settled, I'm going to end the poll for us.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like you have a mix. I actually don't know the right answer here, so maybe you'll work that in, but I'm here. You got this. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be joining today. Thank you for the great introduction, Sam. So today we're talking about navigating ethics in travel promotion and our role as content creators to engage in more impactful and ethical storytelling. A summary of what we'll go through today are the current state of the tourism industry, where we've come from pre-pandemic, where we're heading, our role as content creators, as stakeholders in an industry that has many stakeholders, the importance of authenticity in the content that we share and storytelling that respects and celebrates the amazing diverse cultures and heritage of the destinations that we travel to. And I'm also going to do my best to provide some practical guidance on how to foster a more inclusive and respectful travel discourse and some tips for more conscious content creation. So Sam, thank you for the introduction. Just a little bit more about me. I've been a digital nomad for 6 years now, an ambassador for SafetyWing for 3 years. I'm based between Malta and Australia, both my heritage lands. Have been blogging since 2012. I created my now blog, which focuses primarily on social impact and stories that shape our future for the better in 2015, because I was deeply curious about the intersection of travel and sustainability and social impact. It's in line with my values. I've been an advocate for global equality and human rights since I was 16 years old. And I really see that tourism and globalization kind of covers a lot of these values. And I feel that my intention coming into this talk was to really want to kind of bring in a new narrative and start to ask some of these questions, which can be quite tough in this climate to talk about. But I think it would be really beautiful to approach this with integrity and openness. And so I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit of my insight and my experience over these past 8 years in this space. So whether you have 10 followers or 10,000 followers, you are still an influencer. I remember when I first started my blog, I was really bogged down in how many people, how many likes do I have, hitting that 1,000 milestone, hitting that 2,000 milestone. Having been blogging and being a content creator for such a long time, I realized every single day, every single minute, every single interaction, we are influencing somebody else by the way that we show up in the world. And so this webinar is really for anyone. It doesn't matter, you know, if you're a famous TikToker or if you are just starting out. I think it's really important to acknowledge that the way we show up in the world is going to be received by everybody around us, everybody that reads or watches our content. So back in 2020, when we were in the midst of the global pandemic, the World Tourism Organization put out a statement that said, sustainability must no longer be a niche part of tourism, but must be the new norm for every part of our sector. Pre-pandemic, 2019, 2020, tourism was booming, but it was heading on a bit of a dangerous trajectory. With the increase in movement, mass movement of people, we're starting to see the detriment to the environment. Places like Maya Bay in Thailand, you know, really starting to see the effects of human traffic in those places. Now we're 2023. In 2022, we're starting to see, so what these two graphs show is that, you know, we're really starting to see tourism coming back up to those pre-pandemic levels. And no doubt that a lot of stakeholders in this industry are wanting to see it recover and surpass where we've been. But the question that I think is really important to ask ourselves is, if we're heading this way, how are we going to be able to do it in a way that has a positive impact and not a negative impact? So I would just like to set the scene with a trailer for a documentary that was released in 2021. It was produced by Bruce Poontip, who is the founder of a travel company that some of you might be familiar with, which is G Adventures. They've always had these sorts of values at their core, feeling into social impact, feeling into environmental impact. So I'm going to press play on this trailer and just set the scene a little bit about, you know, where we're at.
We as tourists have kind of lost the plot, I think.
Holidays become cheaper.
Over tourism and environmental degradation.
Mass tourism has led to destruction.
The world has become an oyster for the masses.
We have a fundamental problem with tourism.
The most acclaimed destinations have the highest levels of poverty.
Only 14% of every dollar that's spent in the country stays in the country.
Cruise ships comes in like always and nothing for the locals.
We're such unconscious consumers.
About $2 billion a year spent through volunteerism.
Guys, I found the kindergarten. She's gonna let me come see the babies.
There's been a 75% increase in orphanages. They were there because I wanted to be there.
If tourists didn't pay money to see these entertainments, then the entertainments would change.
More than 500,000 animals are suffering around the world for different types of tourist attractions. People need to know that they're harming the very animals they care about.
It's completely shocking.
The idea we've had of a tourist has to end.
Virtually empty.
Tourism has an opportunity to change law. We have to change our mindset about travel. Whether I am going to be part of the solution or not.
So I feel like that documentary really sort of sets a scene, and it's such an important documentary. For those interested, I can share a bit more about where you can watch the full length afterwards. Some of the challenges that come up in that documentary and that we are facing as we move into this new phase are over tourism. So that is the increased human traffic, as mentioned, increased air road traffic, and which ultimately leads to pressure on waste management systems and in the environment. It's an opportunity to open up the conversation around workers' rights and fair pay. For example, porters in places like Nepal and Machu Picchu. The increased infrastructure to manage these large movements of people. If the stakeholders aren't taking this into consideration, it can result in more pressure on natural ecosystems. And then on the other side, you've got cultural erosion. So gentrification is a term that's come up a bit in the digital nomad movement. Nomads are not solely responsible for gentrification. This happens naturally as a part of the movement of people, but it does result in forced relocation of low-income families. And so having these open discussions about how we can approach this in a way which has a higher amount of awareness, I think is going to really shape what this looks like. So one great resource that I use for talking about these topics is a blog called Rooted Storytelling by a thought leader called Joanna Haugen. And in one of her posts, she says, putting action into place to build back better requires completely rethinking the way we do business, which is true, but it's how all of us do business. Content creators are just one stakeholder in this industry. There is a lot of onus to fall onto governing bodies, to fall onto travelers themselves, to fall onto tourism businesses. But in this webinar, I want to talk about our role. I'm going to talk about 4 pillars that we can use as content creators to shape this future for the better. And the first one that spoke to me that I wanted to talk about was authenticity. How authentic is the content that we're putting out into the world? And are we sharing what is true? I had a thought about whether or not we are greenwashing, for lack of a better word, the travel industry by just sharing one side of it. We're sort of painting this perfect picture when maybe it's not necessarily that way. So the whole Instagram versus reality, I feel that I like to use these two examples because they show one picture of a beautiful destination and then what it looks like when there are a lot of people on that destination. And I feel like it's so beneficial to show both sides of the coin, because when we only show one side of the story, it's hard for us to be able to feel empowered to make those changes. And not to say that, you know, we're going to have to post how dire things are. It's just that at least people can understand that there are challenges here that we're facing. One other example I'm using here is a blog from an influencer called Laura in Waterland, who did a lot around raising awareness of the plastic pollution that washes up on Bali's beaches. Now, Bali is a huge, there are advertisements of traveling to Bali. I know as an Australian, everybody goes to Bali. I think it's important to allow people to understand that there are implications of this. And so maybe this results in people using less plastic, or governments kind of coming in and banning the use of plastic, which has been happening. So some insights for fostering authenticity in your content. So going back to that, sharing all sides of the story. Sometimes that means the good, the bad, and the ugly side of travel. And I feel like sometimes on our Instagram and on our social media, we just want to share the good things. We want to share when we're happy and when something great happened. And that's great. But I think sometimes when people are real and when people show these sides of things, it does create more of a dialogue, and it creates more of an understanding and an opportunity to bring people together to help one another. So speaking up about what is important to you, speaking from your heart, speaking about destinations in a holistic way, sharing a story and not just a picture. The next pillar that I want to talk about was inclusivity. So what kind of stories are we sharing about the destinations that we travel to, and who are the characters in them? In a few slides earlier, we talked about the rights of workers in this industry. One of the influencers that I follow, Brown Girl Trekker, she runs tours in Peru and in Nepal, and she's been a wonderful advocate for workers' rights, to the point where she actually said that she can no longer take people to the Inca Trail because there isn't a way to ensure that these treks do not harm or exploit local workers. By her having the integrity and the openness to have these conversations, not only does it help people to become aware that there is exploitation of workers in this industry, it allows for maybe other trails to open. For example, she would create a tour to a different destination where she knows that there are people that can be supported there. So just having this conversation and bringing up this awareness about these topics is helping to change the dialogue. There are probably millions of pictures of people in Machu Picchu. I've never been there, but I have been to places which have a lot of tourism. I have been to Bali. I have posted my Instagrammable picture in Bali. And so I really think it's just about having the balance. This whole journey is a journey of learning and discovery for all of us. I don't have the answers. We don't have the answers, but by sharing the whole side of the story, I think we can really come in here with a better approach than what we have been doing. One other example I wanted to share was the Impact Travel Social Club, who guides us to kind of seek out underrepresented stories. Going to Paris and seeing the Eiffel Tower is wonderful, but going to Glasgow and spending time on a walking tour that supports a social enterprise who teaches people that have experienced homelessness to become tour guides. I mean, that's a beautiful story and a way that has supported a potentially underrepresented community. So some insights for fostering inclusivity in your content, again, would be sort of amplifying the voices of local people, seeking out those different kinds of experiences. For me, when I travel to a destination, I jump onto Google and I type in social enterprise, social impact experience. The Airbnb experiences platform has actually done a really wonderful job at being able to promote local tours. So you know that the money is mostly directly going to the local people. And one other important point that I wanted to bring up in this topic of inclusivity, aside from the stories that we do share, is the language that we use when we're sharing these things. Now, this is complex, and I didn't really learn about this until I read Joanna's work. To use words like a place is cheap, to use words like a place is undiscovered, in a way, it's discrediting the people that maybe might not find that destination cheap, or it's discrediting Indigenous populations that could have been living on these lands for thousands of years. It takes a lot of time to bring in this awareness about using these words. And I've used these words in the past. And I think it's not really until we have that aha moment of, okay, maybe the way that I am putting this out could potentially be harming in some way. And so it does take a bit of time to kind of step back and acknowledge that, but I just wanted to raise that as an important point. And if you wanted to find more information about that, I can share a more detailed guide. The last point I've got is give your readers the tools to do their own research. So what I do in my blog post is that if I'm writing a guide to a destination, I'll include some books in the beginning of the guide. So I recently wrote a sustainable travel guide to Kathmandu, Nepal. And in the beginning of the guide, I put some books that I felt might be important for people if they wanted to read more about the destination. So there was one book in there about the negative impacts of orphanage tourism. And so that kind of gives the traveler the tool to understand some of the socio-environmental and political undertones of these places, instead of kind of going in without that awareness and then leaving without that awareness. So the next point I wanted to raise was around accessibility and how accessible your content is to the world. So there's two parts to this. One is around the accessibility of content, for example, for people living with disabilities. One of my favorite content creators in this space is Blindish Latina, who talks openly about ways that content creators can consider and be an advocate for people living with disabilities in this space. So 83% of content in the US is actually viewed with the sound off. I don't really like to listen to things with the sound on either. And at first I thought that this was just more for people that might be living with a disability in this space. But I think also sometimes people can find noise to be quite, they can be sensitive to noise. So this, when it comes to this topic, I'm not an expert, so talk to the experts, find the experts. There are people that are doing an amazing job at helping content creators like us to make our content accessible to all types of people. And then the other part of this point was to support organizations and travel companies in this space that are making travel more accessible. So one company, Wheel the World, they're a great company. They they take people who are living with a disability, create tours for them, talk a lot about wheelchair-friendly destinations around the world. So they're a great one to follow, and also to bring in, if this is something that you wanted to talk about on your blog, to bring in some thought leadership and experts in the space. So a few extra insights for fostering accessibility is to add caption to your videos, as I said, add alt text so readers can visualize the content without seeing it. One of the things that I do sometimes as well on my own blog is create audio versions on the blog, just to kind of consider having a range of mediums. It does take a bit of time, and AI is great in this space because it's starting to make a lot of these sort of mundane tasks be able to be done in 5 minutes. And then, as I mentioned before, including different types of content to promote accessibility in travel. So I used Wield the World as an example. One other great organization is called Planet Abled. And then, as I said, if you don't know, ask the experts. And lastly, sustainability. So do we talk about the environmental impacts of our travels, or do we omit it? It is a difficult conversation to have. It's not pristine beaches and Instagrammable places, but this is where we are, and it's important, I think, to speak the truth about the places that we're going to. Because, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, if we don't talk about these things, then I think we lose the ability to make a change, and awareness is really the first step. So some examples that I've used here: I spent a beautiful few months in the Maldives back in 2019, and for the most part, it was incredible. It's magical. I mean, I got to do some great snorkeling there, but I did post this picture, which is in the bottom right, that showed a beach in Male, the capital, that had plastic water bottles washed up on the beach. And, you know, I didn't have to share this, but I felt that it was important to kind of talk about that and to raise the awareness, and to hopefully allow people to maybe bring their own water bottle to these places, or to at least start the conversation. The other example that I've used here is from another sustainable tourism blog called Hidden Lima, where they talk about choosing an environmentally friendly, reef-safe sunscreen when you're going to destinations. And so, to add a positive anecdote to this, Hawaii actually did start to ban non-reef safe sunscreen. So through advocacy, through people speaking up, now if you have non-safe reef safe sunscreen in Hawaii, I've not been, but they might confiscate it, or there are some laws around that to protect the natural ecosystems. So some tips for fostering sustainability: speaking up, sharing environmentally friendly solutions when it comes to travel. As I mentioned, reef safe sunscreen, ways to save water, tips to reduce plastic, promoting different kinds of tourism. So a new trend is regenerative travel. So a lot of information you can find about this. Agritourism is becoming very popular in Italy, where people are invited to farm stays to learn about how to protect the environment there. And if you grew up in the city like me, it's a really good opportunity to kind of reconnect with nature and learn how to grow things. There are ecotourism, citizen science tourism. So there are a whole lot of sustainable tourism initiatives coming out of and coming into our sphere. So to promote them and talk about them. And then promoting slow travel or no travel. I know as travel influencers, to promote no travel is kind of a bit counter to what we're saying, but some things I like to do is to talk about potentially traveling in the off season, traveling in the fringe seasons, you know, maybe encouraging people not to kind of flock to the Instagrammable destinations, which sort of puts me, you know, onto that topic. And I feel like what we can do as content creators is maybe challenge this whole idea of the bucket list and the Instagrammable destination. There are so many pictures out there of places, and I think it's important to sort of take a step back and ask ourselves, going back to the authenticity, why are we posting this? What is the importance of this? Is this just promoting the fact that I have the ability that potentially a lot of other people don't have to go to this place, to take a picture and then to leave? And that for me feels like we're entering this world of elitism. And again, I don't have the answers, but to look at it in this way, to understand travel as a privilege, maybe then we can start to look at how do we change this discourse? How do we make sure that the mass movement of people, that globalization, that freedom of movement, which is something so at the very core of SafetyWing and what we're all about, is allowing people to access freedom of movement. How do we do this that doesn't disadvantage those who may not be able to be on this journey with us? So lastly, I just wanted to end with, what you do makes a difference, and you just have to decide what kind of a difference you want to make. We influence everybody around us, the way we show up in the world, the conversations that we have, the causes that we advocate for. It's really us now. It's up to us to shape our future for the better. And I think that can be a very empowering thing. Thank you so much. If you wanted to find any more about my work, my blog, you can find me at The Altruistic Traveler. Bianca Caruana as well is my Twitter handle. And my new memoir, Soul Truth, was released last month. I talk about my journey out of corporate into the life of a nomad, and bring in some of these threads that I've learned over the years of global equality, sustainability, and really the journey to meet ourselves and to find out what it is that we truly care about in this world.
Amazing. Thank you. I have a cat crashing at the exact moment you're ending.
Bengal.
Yeah, great job.
Do
you need a sip of water? I know that was a lot of content to go through, but you had great pacing, and these are difficult topics to discuss, and they're heavy. And I think for a lot of us who have worked so hard to maybe get to the point of being able to travel and work from anywhere and go to these places, and it's such an inconvenient truth, because we're so excited, like we made it, we're happy that we're here, we want to talk about it, we're so proud of ourselves. And then to really understand this type of stuff can be very uncomfortable for people. Can you talk a little bit about kind of being part of someone's journey for kind of realizing that inconvenient truth, and maybe some things that you've observed from helping people see that?
Yeah, I mean, for some reason I felt like I was the people in that movie Don't Look Up, where everyone's like, no, everything's fine. No, it is heavy. And I feel like when I first started my blog, and I had this big vision to go out there and to make a difference in the world, and what I found was that every single destination I went to, there were local communities, local people that were witnessing a problem and finding a solution. That's the way that us humans evolve. We witness a problem and we find a solution, and we get together and we create positive change. And so, I feel like I don't feel like the answer is going to be for everybody to stop moving. Yes, did the global pandemic give some ease to destinations? Yes, but again, when I was talking about the stakeholders and us being only one of the stakeholders, there are a lot of people in this space, in this world, who are creating innovative ways to solve these problems. Maya Bay in Thailand, they just stopped tourism for, I think it was the winter, or 3 months, and the ecosystem regenerated. Venice stopped cruise ships coming through, and now you're seeing a lot of rise of local people who are able to step into that space with more sustainable methods. It's definitely not all dire. I think it's just around kind of, like, not that the option is just to ignore or to acknowledge, but I feel that there are so many people who are doing amazing things in this space. And, that's worth sharing. That's content. That's beautiful content, sharing what these local populations are doing, amplifying their voices, coming together.
No, for sure. That's a great point. And even if it's like you said, balancing your content more. So I love the example of when you were somewhere and you had been posting a bit of a highlight reel, you called it your postcard moments of these beautiful places you were. And it's like, okay, well, let's just balance it with a little bit of reality here, or also complement it with, okay, so yes, I'm living this amazing lifestyle, but here's some, thoughtful content that can kind of blend into that more highlight reel, whether it's educating people on local communities, how you can get involved, maybe some of the challenges that you've seen that these communities are facing, and just having more of a mixed blend, I think would even be a start for people.
Definitely. Like you said, how you can get involved. I think that's a really beautiful way to empower people. Some of my top performing blog posts are where to volunteer in this destination, so if you want to try and take a different angle and go for the SEO keywords, these keywords are available because everybody's writing top 10 things to do in X. Not really many people are writing where to volunteer and how to support local community in X, and that's giving me great traffic. It really is.
That's a good point, right? I think, well, we know that when it comes to a lot of these big changes we want to see in the world, whether it's, I know I'm, as a vegan, definitely these products that are coming into the market that are alternatives, until there's price parity, until there's a financial incentive also to do so, it becomes more challenging to get people on board. So if you can, find a way for it to even be to your advantage, then that's, mutually beneficial. So that's great advice. On that note, we have a question from Michelle, who is looking for specific actions that they can take. Talked a little bit about Vietnam being their favorite place to live as a digital nomad. Definitely one of the places where they've seen a lot of negative impact of over tourism in Halong Bay, crowds, trash in the water, overdevelopment. Have you been there yourself?
I was there, oh gosh, going back now, about 2012, and then in 2016. And I feel like the narrative for these destinations is very similar. And I did bear witness to the sort of lack of waste management facilities in places like Southeast Asia. And so, they suffer the most from the influx of people because there's not the management there. So no, it's a good question.
And so on that point, Michelle's wondering, so do you have ideas for what we can do as travelers, travel bloggers, to support positive change, especially in these crowded World Heritage areas? So I know we've talked about the types of content we create and being thoughtful about what we post and what we promote and the language we use around it. Anything else that you want to kind of mention as a way to take action? And, there's definitely thinking more clearly about what we post and giving it a second thought sometimes, but are there other movements that you've seen that we should know about? You talked about volunteering. What else would you add?
I feel like in this space, there are more often than not a grassroots movement of social enterprises and conscious communities that are working to solve some of these issues. I know in Cambodia, there's an organization called Plastic Free Cambodia, and they, from a grassroots level, managed to speak to hotel after hotel and stop the use of single-use plastic to the point where they were actually distributing water bottles, selling them at these destinations. So I wonder if there's a way, if especially as a nomad, if you're based there, to kind of tap into some of these ecosystems and sort of look at what other destinations are doing and start to I guess, be an advocate in that way, whether or not it's through just the promotion, connecting people, volunteering, creating some kind of a way that brings other stakeholders in. So when I was talking about, we aren't just one piece of, we're just one piece of the pie. I think governing bodies, tourism leaders, tourism bodies, we all need to be having these conversations. So yeah, if there's a way to connect with those sorts of people, and then again, just kind of bringing this awareness into content.
If I'm there for somewhere, maybe I'm not spending a lot of time, and so it might be hard for me to find out these local social enterprises or these communities. Are there specific places that you would turn to online to find out about this? Of course, there's your website. I don't know if there's Facebook groups you're in or any other practical resources to kind of source these opportunities.
Yeah, sure. So I have a list of responsible tourism websites on my website. If you just go under resources, there are loads of podcasts. And yeah, I would recommend those. I think Facebook groups can also be really great. I'm not necessarily a part of any for Vietnam, but I know that in Bali, there is a wonderful group called Nomads Giving Back, they have hubs in Bali, they have hubs in, they have a hub in Bali, a hub in Medellin, a hub in Argentina, and they might be worth reaching out to as well. They might have somebody in Vietnam. What their mission is to kind of create this dialogue around how nomads can have a positive impact on the places they visit.
Mm-hmm. And I'm actually on your website right now. I'm just going to share my screen just so everybody can see, what an amazing ongoing resource this is. You have it organized by specific destinations. So let's say we were interested in Vietnam, different blog posts on there, different resources that you found. So I think this is also a great place for people to start.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's sustainable tourism resources and a little bit more. If you go under organizations and experiences, podcasts, there's my plug for travel insurance that covers COVID-19 with SafetyWing. So yeah, lots of information to be uncovered.
Amazing. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, about the ambassador program with SafetyWing and how you've been with us for the last several years and how that's kind of played the role in your blog and you being able to do this more sustainably yourself from a financial perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we can all agree that putting out content is a pretty challenging way to pay the bills sometimes. But when I can have a partner like yourself and have a program that is so user-friendly and that is beneficial to my readers, the reason why I don't use Google Ads is because it's hard for me to promote to know that what I promote on my blog is not going to be in some way, shape, or form related to some of the values that aren't dear to me. So I don't know if an ad's going to come up for Nike shoes that's going to be linked to the fact that there's not a lot of transparency in their supply chain. And so to have a partner like SafetyWing, where I know that your values are aligned around accessibility of some of these things which aren't so accessible to people. I'm from Australia, so I don't have a huge issue when it comes to medical insurance, but I know some other countries do. And especially being able to have that sort of like month to month as I move around the world and have the privilege of traveling to all these destinations, I'm grateful that I can have a partnership with somebody that I trust.
Amazing. Well, we're very happy to be partner with you. So if you're also on this webinar or you're watching this in the future of a recording and you have your own travel content or travel related content, whether it's a blog or social media or podcast, and you are interested in ways that you can generate income from that in a very passive way, our SafetyWing Ambassador program is open to any content creators who might be interested in promoting Nomad Insurance or some of our products like Bianca does. So Carlotta, I think, shared a link to join. It's totally free to join. You can do that there. And so I guess some final questions for you, Bianca, as we wrap up. And if anyone else has anything that they want to add, please put it in the chat. But, do you think that digital nomads are destroying these beautiful destinations? What are your thoughts on kind of that language that you see in the media based on everything that you've learned and knowing that you're, kind of one yourself?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I feel like the globalization and movement of people is something that has been happening for eons. Yes, in some ways, do I feel that digital nomads are privileged and have an advantage? I feel like yes, it's very important to acknowledge that we have the privilege of being able to move to different destinations. Are we the main cause of these issues? No, there are so many other causes of some of these issues here. Do we have a role to play in the solution? Yes. I was just watching a video the other day on TikTok of a young Colombian woman who was speaking about how, the rents in Medellin have been getting so high, and you've sort of got people coming in and saying, yeah, you, like I mentioned earlier, using words like cheap, come to Medellin, it's so cheap. Is there a better way that we can be talking about these destinations, as you mentioned earlier, Sam, to balance, not just sort of make this so traveler centric? How do we show up in the world that it doesn't make it all about us? And I think that is something that is not only relevant to our role as digital nomads, but I think our role as, beings that are part of a community of humans that are living on this planet together.
Love that. How do we make it not all about us? I think that is just a good pointer for us to be thinking about, whether it's promoting travel content or promoting other things. And I think that's all who we aspire to be. It's just very easy to get caught up in behavior and actions that are kind of against that. So it's so nice to have you in, Bianca, and remind us of our role that we want to play in this world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out, my inbox is always open, and really grateful for the opportunity to connect with you all.
Amazing. Bye, everyone.